Hello there guys, CD Mangaka here. Apologize for the weaker voice, but I wanted to go ahead and put out my thoughts on the 6.7 patch notes that are dropping today. It's a patch that's got some, I think a few major changes, a couple minor changes coming on through, so it'll be interesting to see what this kind of entails for the competitive scene. That's what we'll be focusing on in these patches. I'm not too good on like what's strong in solo queue, namely just because I don't play solo queue at a high level, so but keeping up with the competitive scenes, knowing what's strong within the scenes, knowing what's weak within the scenes, I'm able to kind of be able to extrapolate what we're going to see in competitive play once patch 6.7 gets dropped, which I think this might be the patch that they use for the mid-seasonal invitational, so we'll see how that goes. Anyways, I wonder if they say that real fast. This is actually my first time looking at them, but I've like kept up with the PvE updates, so most of this is going to be familiar. So the death timer change, that's going to be actually huge. So, alright, so going through champions, Aurelion Sol started off, he seems to have like a decent to okay win rate in solo queue. We haven't seen him in competitive just yet. I think he's a champion that it's taking teams a little longer to figure out, okay, like, what's the best way that we can use him? And the fact that he's getting nerfed is going to kind of maybe dissuade some people from it. His nerfs revolve around, his stun is going to last less long, shorter. He has a shorter stun. And then his ultimate, it still is going to have the damage, but the slow duration, is shorter, and the slow itself is also weaker, so there's a little less utility in his ultimate, but it's still got the burst, it's still got the knockback that exists within it. So him already getting nerfs, it might impede his arrival into competitive play, but I think that there's still potential for him. Whether or not we'll see him as a jungle pick or as like a solo lane pick is going to be the big question, I think. As a jungler, he has solid clear. As a mid laner, I think he does okay in lane, and he has very strong roams. So we'll see what that really comes up with, but you know, the fact that he's getting nerfed might delay his arrival to competitive play. Corki, his passive, no longer gives him an extra 10% damage on his auto attacks. That's fairly huge, just because that always gave him like, that already added on to his really strong burst and just made him trade really well. And the fact that he had hybrid damage as well, made it so that building resistances against him was pretty much impossible. You had to get an armor item and an MR item. So this is just going to tone down his basic laning phase as well as his scaling as the game goes on. He still brings in a lot to the teams, but maybe with this nerf, he's just not going to be able to trade as well. So some matchups that he might have gone even with or had an advantage in, maybe those will change, and that will affect his place in the meta. So Aurelia is getting some buffs here. She has reduced mana on her Q and a buff on the AD ratio. So it's it's more usable for her, less punishing on her mana pool. But she doesn't build a lot of AD as it is. If we do see her competitive play, usually it's like a Triforce into tank items, maybe Blade the Rune King. So the AD ratio buff, it's nice and it'll be there to help, but it's not going to like cause her to hugely spike in damage. And with the meta being against tank tops, she could probably come around. I think she does okay against tanks. But we'll see how that goes, see whether or not people pick her up. But I think it's going to take someone coming in, having a dominating game on her before people go, hey, maybe she's OP. So it's something, but I don't think it's game breaking. Jin's getting nerfs. He is getting little less damage on his Q. The mana cost on it's going up, so it's going to strain his mana pool a little bit more. In response, though, they are bringing down the mana cost of his E. So Riot is saying, like, yeah, hey, it's going to be easier for you to throw down traps, but harassing with Q is going to be less effective. This will tone down his lane aggression while buffing him up a little bit for utility. Kindred is having her W damage, or not her damage, her heal reduced a bit, so this will hurt her early game sustain, make it harder for her to invade. And the ultimate is now self-cast on her, so she can't cast it on an ally. That means that she has to move into position, probably use flash to get into position to cast her ultimate onto allies in order to save them, or the allies are going to have to get close. It's going to change the way that she's played and how her ultimate is used. I think she's still going to be a good pick. She still has plenty of damage, but maybe her aggression early will be toned down, and this is going to affect how teams can have to play around her in terms of team fighting. All right, yeah, okay. Lissandra's hair whips back and forth. Game over. GG. Pick it up. Lissandra's hair, new OP. Just freaking pivot and slap them with that ponytail. All right. All right. Lux's W. So Lux has kind of been like sort of being phasing out a little bit as we move on into the meta. She's still fairly okay, but with more tanks coming in, it just reduces her poke effectiveness, especially when you have like Maokai coming back in and he's getting more resistances as well as his AoE damage reduction. So this is just giving her some more defensive utility, probably helping her shield more allies, but I don't think we're going to see a whole lot of her just because we are moving to a more of a sustained damage tanky meta. Nidalee, pounce damage being reduced. This is affecting her clear speed in the early game a little bit, as well as just her ability to trade. It's a minor nerf, but again, you know, Nidalee has just been slowly being chipped at, and already we're seeing like she's losing her ability to sustain so well. So this could be another thing just to add and make her early game even more weaker, and tone down her early aggression power. And maybe if she gets another set of nerfs, I think we'll see her out of the meta, but I think that she still brings in a lot of damage. It's just people are going to have to be a lot more careful with her in the early game, and maybe some other junglers can abuse her. All right, Poppy. Let's talk about Poppy. So Poppy's easily the best top laner, like bar none. Fiora used to be able to tangle with her a bit, but Fiora's nerfs really hurt the one-on-one matchup. Fiora can still split push late game against Poppy, but early game just goes strictly to Poppy. So let's look at... So they're toning down her lane aggression as well as some of her utility. Her ultimate's the same, her W is the same, the armor on her is the same, so she's still going to get tanky, but they're reducing her ability to bully in lane early on. So the passive is losing a lot of range. It's going down to 425. That way she just doesn't have as much range to harass. She'll have to get closer and expose herself to retaliation harass from some long range spells or for some gap closers in order to trade using her passive. And it also doesn't reset her basic attack anymore, so that's just another way to reduce her trade. Like, you just can't auto-throw and get 2 auto-attacks off in an instant, so that hurts her early game trading a lot. Her Q base damages are going down by a little bit in the early game, but by quite a lot. This is the spell that you max first. So it loses about 25 damage, but when you think about the fact that it procs twice, it's really losing 50 damage max rank if you hit both procs. So that's a bit of a substantial nerf in the early game, but it is being compensated by having a late game buff with it doing 7% of target's maximum health against 6. So she's still going to be really strong against tanks, especially as they're building their items, but against some of the squishier top laners, and in the early phases, she's going to have just less power. And then her heroic charge, the range on it's going down to the same range as her passive. So this just means that she has to get closer and expose herself to more harass options before she can hit her E. She can't engage from you as far away. This actually hurts her flanking in team fights as well. So that nerf could be fairly substantial, but still, she's going to be really tanky. She still brings a lot of utility, a lot of CC, probably still a lot of damage, but this could be enough to make it so that she's not as oppressive in lane. We'll see if more nerfs have to come around. Rammus, his R cooldown is going up. He's a pick that we're sort of not seeing a whole lot of, but he's still very much of a niche pick. This pick might hurt him. No, it does hurt him, but it might be enough to really just make him that one-off pick. Because a lot of people just pick Rammus when there's like 180 carry on the enemy team, 280 carries on the team, and they use his ultimate on cooldown just for the wave clear on it. So adding 40 seconds to that cooldown means that he's just not going to have as much control of the lanes and be able to push out and create pressure, and that's just to make him more exposable and being easier to dive. So I think that we might see him, but it should only be in circumstances where the enemy is running like 3 triple AD. So Soraka, she's still in a very strong spot after her rework. Riot is making it so that her spells are costing more mana, so that could constrain her her sustain in lane just because she doesn't have as much of a mana pool to work with these nerfs. We'll see where it goes though. I think that maybe her healing numbers need to be adjusted, but you know, this is a minor step to curtailing Soraka in terms of solo queue. Udyr, he's still a little bit crazy. They're reducing some of his base regen, so he's gonna get that hurts his clearing. His damage per second on his Phoenix and the proc damage is also going down, so this hurts his early game clear, as well as some of his late game trading a bit, but this really is focusing on just making sure that Udyr is losing his ability to counter jungle, to clear fast, to be all over into mega farm. So it's a fairly substantial nerf for him. Again, something that we'll only really worry about in solo queue. Zed, we've seen Zed a couple of times in competitive play. I think in solo queue he's doing all right. His cooldown on his W is going up by 4 seconds. That just means that there's more time for him to be punished, while after he throws out his W, so this makes him more exposable to ganks. And the bonus attack damage from his W is also going down, so it's losing quite a bit of percentages on it. Now, it's a 1% nerf in the early game. The thing to remember with Zed is I believe people max QE on him. I don't know if people do QW on him, just because you only really need the one shadow within if you're trying to burst someone down and to make those plays, and maxing your Q and then your E just gives you more raw AD to work with, although the passive W is a reason for it to get nerfed. So this nerf's a particular build for him in the early game. If you don't max your W, it's going to be 1% weaker, which isn't a lot, but if you're maxing it second, then you're losing 5% on it. So this kind of is sort of trying to, I think, coerce Zed into maxing his E second, just so that you're not losing efficiency when you're maxing it. So yeah, then they're changing up a whole bunch of splash arts. So those are the champion ones. There's a couple of nerfs in there. I think Poppy's the biggest one. Nidalee is definitely one to consider. Is also another large one. So, and they're updating all these splash arts, modifying them in some way. Maw Mormortius. Now, Maw's been a really overpowered item for a while, and it's really hurting AP mages. So it's losing magic resist, and it doesn't give attack speed anymore once the lifeline is proc. So that means that you're not synergizing so well with it. So people are going to be less tanky, and the AP mages are going to have a little easier time killing champions like Graves and like Kindred. So we have to keep in mind that Kindred lost some of her sustain, and now with Maw Mormortius, she's also losing, or they rather, are losing some of their survivability. So this really could hurt Kindred in her late game team their late game team fighting as well. Warlord's Bloodlust is losing it's being changed a little bit for melee champions. Effectiveness versus creeps, it's 25% for ranged champions, so it's less effective for sustaining a marksman off of. So that's a little kind of sucks, but it basically means that it's still good for team fighting, but maybe this will be enough to make AD carries go, you know what, I'm just going to build a Vampiric Scepter, call it good, and take further a battle instead. Death timers. So death timers have been really long. After 30 minutes, we've seen this before when teams can be ahead and then lose about 30, 35 minutes just off of one team fight ace because death timers are that long. So rebounds death timers are going to be less punishing between minutes 30 and 55. Timers before and after these points are unchanged. So it's supposed to be shorter. I wish they would show the math on this one, but this is supposed to make it so that a team that's behind and just happens to win a miracle team fight doesn't just suddenly get to end the game because you get like 40-second death timers. So that's scaling it down quite a bit. As a result of this, games are going to be longer and comebacks are going to be more difficult. So it's a change I like just because it makes it so that if you're going to do a comeback, you're going to have to do it. You're going to have to win several fights in a row. And that could be and that's again I don't think it's going to change like what champions are played, but it's going to change just like the mid-game tempo for everything. It can make closing out games harder just because teams are going to be able to come up and defend more often. So I think we're going to, because of this change, depending on how much the timers change, we're going to have some longer games. Vision. Assistance, if you can see an enemy champion without the assistance of wards or vision effects, they can always see you and vice versa. Other aside, fixed a bug, killing a blue string, reveal the area around you for a short period of time. Pick or take near a wall, could give them vision over that wall. So a couple vision patches up, nothing too big. Rotating game queue mode, so the weekends are going to start having different game modes. So Ascension, Earth, all those fun games, they're coming back. Pre-made limiter. Hello, this is interesting. Tightening pre-made skill gap limits at the top of the ranked ladder. The wide skill variance players makes the existing pre-made limiting rules less effective at ensuring players are constructing pre-mades the matchmaker can handle fairly. Up until this point, we allow Diamond 5 players to play with challengers, but we're tightening the duo queue requirements to ensure fair pre-mades are being composed. This also closes a loophole where players could queue with a Diamond 5 Smurf for easier games at the top of the ladder. Here's how it will work. Challenger, Master, and Diamond players can now only queue up for ranked matches with players within 2 divisions of the Master and Challenger, or each counted as single divisions above Diamond. No examples of the new base bands in practice. Challenger, Master, Diamond 1. Diamond 1 can queue with Challenger, Master, Diamond 1, 2, and 3. Diamond 5 can queue with Diamond 3, 4, 5, Plat 1, and 2. Platinum Highline players can queue with low Diamond players based on the Diamond players' restrictions above. All Platinum players can still queue with Platinum and Gold players of any division. Bronze, Silver, and Gold are unaffected. Okay, so they're just changing the preliminary stuff. This isn't addressing the issues that I think we see in Dynamic Queue of the long queue times that pros are going through just because of like the mismatch and all the pre-mades going in. But it's something, it could help, but I don't know if it will address like what the pros are complaining about. A couple of different things for the looting and stuff. They're just adding a bunch of little features to it. Not something I care about. A couple of changes here. Be interrupted. Santa Monica. Play the blood again. Bunch of small bug changes, and we got 3 skins. So ultimately, I think what the biggest takeaways is that Kindred is getting a lot of nerfs with Maul and Mortius, as well as to their own kit. Remembered it this time. So we might see less priority on Kindred in these patches, and Graves might start to come up more as like the go-to AD marksman jungler. Jhin is losing some of his lane dominance, and Zed receives some nerfs. I think those are the biggest changes within the patches, so I think AP Champions is better. And of course, Poppy is losing some of her lane power. We'll have to see how that affects some of her one-on-one matchups. But, you know, it might be able to let some of the other top lane champions sort of breathe a little bit against her. I'm interested to see what this means for the Poppy-Maokai matchup, since Maokai has been popping up as like the other go-to top laner. Thank you guys for watching this video and this patch breakdown. I hope you enjoyed it. Hope it helped you kind of understand what we can expect to see from the solo queue. I'll have a video up on the Taric rework and my thoughts after I go read it and think it out.